Table 3-1 on page 43 of your PMBOK is your friend. It's your guide and map for you to understand all 42 processes and how they interact with one another. Across the top you see 5 process groups, and to the left you see 9 knowledge areas. The 5 process groups are Initiating Process Group, Planning Process Group, Executing Process Group, Monitoring and Controlling Process Group, and finally, Closing Process Group. It's very important to remember that these 5 process groups are not the same as project phases. Again, these 5 process groups are not the same as project phases. In a simple project, these 5 process groups may span across the entire project. Or, in a more complex project, these 5 process groups may repeat in each phase. Under the knowledge areas, we have Project Integration Management, Project Scope Management, Project Time Management, Project Cost Management, Project Quality Management, Project Human Resource Management, Project Communications Management, Project Risk Management, Project Procurement Management. The number next to each knowledge area is the chapter number in PMBOK for easy reference. It's very difficult to memorize all the inputs and outputs of the 42 processes. That's why every time you read about a process, you want to come back to this table and see which process group that falls under, which knowledge area that is in, and how that particular process relates to other processes, and be able to connect the dots. You need to understand how the processes relate to each other both vertically and horizontally from this table. For example, in a given project or phase, the initiating process group typically takes place first. Then it moves on to the planning process group, then the executing process group, then the monitoring and control process group, and comes to the closing process group. One thing that this table does not tell you is in what sequence the processes would take place. For example, looking at the initiating process group, we would typically develop project charter first, then move on to identify stakeholders. However, when we look at the closing process group, a phase or project cannot come to a close until the close procurement process takes place before. Therefore, looking at the closing process group, the sequence would be 12.4, close procurements on the bottom, and then it'll move on to 4.6, close project or phase. So you do need to know how these processes take place in what sequence. On the exam, each process group has different percentage of questions. For example, the initiating process group makes up 11% of the exam, and the planning process group makes up 23% of the exam, and executing process group takes up 27% of the exam. Monitoring and controlling process group makes up 21% of the exam. Closing process group 9%, and lastly, professional and social responsibility, which is not part of the process groups, takes up 9% of the exam. Among the 5 process groups, the planning process group is the most important. That's why there are 20 processes, almost half of all processes under this group. It also makes it challenging to study for this group. When you consider the different percentage of exam questions, the initiating process group makes up 11% of questions but has only 2 processes. The same is true with the closing process group. which makes up 9%. That means you want to make sure you know the 4 processes very well so you can get the 20% of the exam correctly. The executing process group has 8 processes for 27% of questions. The monitoring and controlling process group has 10 processes for 21% of questions. If you don't have enough time to prepare for the exam, you may want to keep this in mind to make your time most effective.